You are looking damper on this Thanksgiving week, sir.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul. Thank you.
Listen, this is a scary story about the fentanyl. And I know we've had several stories, and it just seems that those are the ones we know about. There are a lot of things we probably don't know about. But as it relates to the state of Mississippi, and where is it coming from? Is most of that coming from the southern border?
Yes, sir. I mean, fentanyl that is imported not only into this country but in Mississippi is sourced from China and also from the Mexican drug cartels down south of the border.
So they got a better chance of sending it to Mexico and bringing it this way than in the U.S. mail.
Yes, sir. That and there are other various trafficking routes into this country that are also utilized by drug cartels and criminal organizations throughout the world that want their drugs sold here in the United States. And unfortunately, we have a voracious appetite for pharmaceutical drugs and illicit drugs.
Unbelievable. And we were talking off the air. I guess I'm old school from the boomer generation, but just the idea of taking a pill that somebody pops in and says, take this, it'll make you feel great at a party, is beyond me how you could, even drunk, how you could do that. You never know what's in it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like getting in a knife fight with an octopus. It's not if you're going to overdose. You are going to overdose. It's not if you're going to get cut. You are going to get cut. It's just a matter of how many times and how deep.
Why do they do this if it's something else that's supposed to be in there, and maybe it is 80 or 90% of it? Why do they put fentanyl in there?
Well, Paul, so fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, and if you compare and contrast fentanyl to heroin, if you compare and contrast fentanyl to cocaine and heroin are derived from an organic source. They're derived from a plant, the poppy plant and the coca plant. So your cost in producing cocaine and heroin is going to be higher because you're actually farming.
Right.
And then you also need a greater workforce to convert that plant into cocaine and into heroin. But fentanyl is synthetic. All you need is the precursory chemicals to manufacture fentanyl, and there you have it. The same thing with methamphetamine.
Yeah. Is meth mixed with anything, or is it because there's a different delivery system, or why isn't meth in a lot of these things?
Well, the primary precursory component for methamphetamine is pseudoephedrine. Methamphetamine is also synthetically manufactured, and we see that meth and fentanyl are both the primary causes of drug-related overdose deaths that we're experiencing here in the state of Mississippi. And we went from 392 in 2019 to 529 for 2020. And the two drugs that we've seen more prevalent in the toxicology reports have been fentanyl and methamphetamine.
All right, now go up. What were the numbers one more time?
Well, in 2019, we had 392 drug-related overdose deaths reported to MBN, and in 2020, we had 529 drug-related overdose deaths reported to MBN. And as of Monday, I was advised yesterday that we had 367 drug-related overdose deaths reported to us. One of the most unfortunate thing is that we've had 12 drug-related overdose deaths reported to MBN since November 15th.
Now, would you attach that rise from 2019's 352 to 2020's 529 to maybe the legislation that put the Sudafed back on the market over the counter?
No, sir. I would attribute those drug-related overdose deaths to the prevalence of fentanyl being sold in the illicit market and also the prevalence of methamphetamine being sold, used in combination together, as well as the continued misuse and abuse of pharmaceutical drugs.
Have you seen that on the streets in the state of Mississippi? I mean, we had a couple of busts not too long ago, but share with us some of the incidences where you've had your folks take a lot of fentanyl off the street.
Well, working in investigations throughout the state of Mississippi, our agents are constantly seizing bulk amounts of fentanyl, bulk amounts of methamphetamine. As we look at the toxicology reports and we track the drug-related overdose deaths, we see that fentanyl and methamphetamine are the two primary contributing factors. We see fentanyl and meth being pressed, colored, scored, and sold as fake pharmaceutical drugs. And people are actually buying what they think is a pharmaceutical drug from someone outside of a pharmacist, and it's actually fentanyl and methamphetamine pressed, colored, and scored.
Colonel Steven Maxwell, who's director of Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics. Is any one part of the state worse than any of the others?
Well, we see the largest amount of drug-related overdose deaths in our most densely populated areas. As we were looking at the data, the overdose deaths reported to MBN last week, we saw that Harrison County had the highest number of drug-related overdose deaths. Then second to that was Rankin, Madison, and Hinds County. DeSoto County in North Mississippi has had an increase, and we also see in pockets in South and in Southwest and Southeast Mississippi, Jackson County and Pearl River County are also seeing an increase in drug-related overdose deaths.
Does it track along demos and demographics lines as far as African American, Caucasian American, and on the coast, maybe the Vietnamese population? Does that track along those lines?
Well, according to the CDC, there's been a total 29.4% increase in drug-related overdose deaths from 2019 to 2020. And all demographics saw an increase in drug-related overdose deaths. Mississippi...
people blame mostly the pandemic.
Well, the pandemic was a contributing factor as well. But in Mississippi, the demographics track along those nationally. We've seen an increase in drug-related overdose deaths in both African-American, Caucasian-American, male, female, all demographics.
When you just, pull into a service station off the interstate and you just look back and see how many trucks are passing, just unbelievable amount of traffic. What percentage do you think you actually catch?
Well, what I can tell you, Paul, is that, drug cartels and people who seek to violate our state's Uniform Controlled Substance Act, they're very creative and very innovative. Yeah. And we're working with the Mississippi Highway Patrol, the Mississippi Department of Transportation, our federal partners, and various other local and state agencies. And I think that for what we are expected to do with the resources that we have, we are doing a very good job. But when you look at the increase in the number of drug-related overdose deaths, that's an indicator that there's still a significant amount of drugs making it to the communities and into the hands of unfortunately, our citizens here in the state of Mississippi.
What additional resources do you guys need at the Bureau of Narcotics?
Well, what I can tell you is that, Governor Reeves and Commissioner Tyndall have done a very good job of expressing our concerns and our needs at the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics. The legislature has been very kind to us, and we look forward to have another great year in this upcoming session with them understanding what our mission is, and we know that they're going to make sure that we have and receive everything that we need.
I want to ask you about college towns and a couple of other things. Can you hang on for a second?
Yes, sir.
That is Colonel Steven Maxwell, Director of Mississippi. And the Honorable Colonel Steven Maxwell, Director of Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, is in the studio. We told you yesterday the Christmas candy that people hate, Perez. CandyStore.com came out with a list of favorite candies by state, revealing the top 3 choices for every state. Peppermint bark, which we had no idea what it was.
No, still don't know.
Seems to be gaining in popularity with 14 states picking it as their top choice, an increase of 3 states from last year. Some of the states picking peppermint bark as their fave: California, Iowa, Illinois, Kansas, and Michigan. Reese's Cups, the little minis, are losing steam. They better get a different advertising campaign. Dropping 3 states this year, 6 over the last 2. Overall, it's top in 5 states: Indiana, Maryland, and Oregon. And the Chocolate Santas are the pick in 6 states: South and North Dakota, Ohio, New Mexico, Maine, and Mississippi. So our favorite chocolate here is the Chocolate Santa. The candy is the Chocolate Santa.
Okay, then.
And that's if he's about, because our weight situation, he's got to be like a 4 foot tall. And don't give me no hollowed out like that Easter bunny. I want my chocolate all the way through. So we were talking about several different things here, and I do want to mention this, that let's talk about the solutions. How do we solve this? How do we, in 2022, get a grasp on this?
Well, Paul, we've got to continue to have a multifaceted effort. And so what we've done at the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics under the leadership of Commissioner Tyndall is that we've expanded our partnerships beyond traditional law enforcement agencies. And so right now, that partnership includes other state agencies like the Mississippi Department of Mental Health, Mississippi Public Health Institute, the Mississippi Department of Health, and nonprofits like First Responders of Mississippi. The goal is to raise the conscious awareness about drug-related overdose deaths as it is associated with mental health and behavioral health issues, and also how that impacts violent crime, the violent crime that we're seeing across our state.
How are you doing that, Colonel? By literature, by speaking engagements? How are you doing that?
Well, we're doing it by literature, and we're also planning some community forums in some of the areas that I mentioned earlier where we've had spikes in drug-related overdose deaths. And I'd like to say that the Mississippi Department of Mental Health have come out with cards that contain a QR code that we're passing out, that we've received from them, that will allow any individual seeking help to navigate through a specific portal by going to that QR code, and they can access locations geographically where they can seek care for mental health, behavioral health, and substance use disorder. And so has the Mississippi Public Health Institute. They've also come out with a card that we're handing out that allows a portal not just for persons seeking help, but also for providers.
You know, you hate to say this, but when you sit down and you have a good program, you sit down and you talk to 11th grader, 12th grader, or somebody out of high school into college or in the workforce, and you try to talk to them about the dangers of drugs, sometimes it's right over their heads. They're not interested. Wouldn't you agree that if we're going to change this, we got to get into the middle schools and below, 4th grade, 5th grade, and start teaching these kids the hazardous and have it ingrained in them?
Well, absolutely, Paul. We've not only got to begin to help kids to understand that the decisions that they make today can impact who they want to be tomorrow, and talk to them not only about preparing them to make good decisions for today, but good decisions for today that will potentially impact their future. We've also got to continue to educate the public, because one of the issues that we're seeing is that we have a significant number of pregnant parenting women in our state and across the country, who are using drugs during pregnancy, during breastfeeding, which also not only affects the fetus and the baby, but if they're parenting children, it also puts the children in a position where they could potentially deal with some degree of trauma.
Do we have any idea what the percentage is or the number of people they think in Mississippi, pregnant women who are abusing while they're pregnant?
Well, in my conversation with Jan Dawson, director of the Mississippi Public Health Institute, she told me that the Mississippi Department of Mental Health identified 28,000 pregnant parenting women in Mississippi in 2020 that were living with some form of a substance use disorder. And that trends with the national number, where the National Institute of Drug Abuse indicated that 5% of pregnant women breastfeeding and parenting indicated that they had used one or more addictive substances.
Is marijuana inclusive in that?
Yes, marijuana, alcohol, as well as illicit drugs and pharmaceutical drugs.
All the way up to delivery date or?
Delivery date and continuing through breastfeeding. Yes, sir.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
28,000 in the state of Mississippi. You think that's a conservative number?
Well, I think it is a conservative number, because we only know what we know.
What are some of the other drugs, Colonel, beside the marijuana?
Well, we're talking about fentanyl. We're talking about methamphetamine, cocaine. We're talking about various and sundry other pharmaceutical drugs and synthetic drugs as well.
Do we have any idea is any data or studies being done after the birth, the effects on the child?
I'm not sure, but in this partnership that we have with the Mississippi Department of Mental Health and the Mississippi Department of Health, we're going to be expanding our conversations beyond, just substance use disorder, because what we see is if you're dealing with a mental health issue, then that potentially can lead to behavioral health issues. Which could potentially lead to you self-medicating.
Depression to drugs.
Absolutely. Using illicit drugs.
It's a massive job just to get this under control. The opioid situation, where is that in our state?
Well, Paul, what I would like to say is that we're in a really good position in the state of Mississippi. We're one of only 2 states that has a Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, and leadership and attitude are both reflective one with the other. And, the governor has a clear understanding of what our mission is. Commissioner Tyndall does also. And in working with the legislature, I think that Mississippi is poised and positioned to continue to have a positive impact on addressing the issues associated with the drug culture. It is a collective team effort.
Do you see any problems with the law enforcement divisions that are in and around college towns, that they may need more training or they need more help? Because that is a hot spot, regardless of where you go across the state.
Well, what I can tell you is that the law enforcement agencies in our college towns are very professional, and they're very well trained. We work with them, on occasions. We work with them, to assist them in investigations that they have going on. I think that they're doing a very, very, very good job. We're working with our partner, Gulf Coast HIDA, to bring more training as the drug culture continues to evolve, because the same science and technology that drives the legitimate economy also drives the illegitimate economy. So we're constantly reaching out to law enforcement agencies across the state to try to bring more training into the state.
I was telling you, I watched To Catch a Smuggler and some of those on the border, and we were talking off the air how sophisticated these people are just in their profile, and they're amazing what they catch because they do it every single day. They know. They've seen that. They've seen how many people try to trick them, and they are elementary in what they're doing. Do we have dogs? How many dogs do we have here in the state as far as drug dogs?
Well, at the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, we don't have any
You don't have any
canines, no, but we work with police departments and sheriff's departments across the state that do have canine divisions, canine units. The Mississippi Highway Patrol, they have canine units, and so when we're
you have access to call a canine unit to
absolutely. We're working, interdiction-related investigations, so forth and so on. We definitely utilize those canine divisions at police departments, sheriff's departments, and our sister agency, the Highway Patrol.
I think I asked you, I'm not sure if it was on the air or off the air, how many people you had in your force?
Well,
agents.
We hope to get that number up to 150. Commissioner Tyndall has committed himself to doing that.
How many do we have now?
Roughly about 97.
Woo! And we need about 150.
Well, that's what we'd like.
If anybody wants to join in, well, you probably have the applicants, you just don't have the money.
Well, exactly.
Is that? I would imagine that's going to be the focus of the 2022 coming up.
Right. Well, we're looking for the legislature to put that gift under our Christmas tree this year.
Do you think there's any money from some of this coming down from Washington that could be used for that?
Well, I hope so. The legislature does a very good job. They're great stewards of taxpayers' dollars, and we hope that they find a way to carve something out for the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics.
Speaking of carving, Mama going to be putting the turkey on the table coming up on Thursday.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking forward to that.
Good to have you, sir.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
it very much.
Thank you.
Happy holidays to you.